Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go over all the books that I read in June, which, wow, what a month. I read 21 books in June, maybe 22, my math could be wrong, but at least 21 books in June. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. I was just flying through books. It was kind of a roller coaster ride, to be honest with you, because, I would find some books that I loved, and then I found books that I did DNF a book in June, which it was pretty sad because it is a pretty hyped book, but it just didn't do anything for me. I couldn't stay in the book. I just couldn't do it. So I feel bad for that. But definitely stick around to see all of the books that I read in June. Make sure that you like and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future content. Also, make sure that you head on over to my Patreon, become a Patreon member, because then you will be entered into a giveaway that will end August 1st. That is for the Shadow Kissed Omnibus by Rebecca L. Garcia, which has all 4 books in the series. It's completed. It has sprayed edges. It's signed by the author. This version of the book will not be offered to anybody outside of the Kickstarter that she had. It is right here, if you guys can see. But definitely make sure that you head on over and enter into that. And then whenever you do become a Patreon member, you have access to content that will not be found here on YouTube. And then also you can pick a book for me to read. Our book club is going to start in August. There's so many good things coming out, guys. So head on over there, join the group. Let's have a good time and talk about books. Let's talk about different things. I love suggestions, and we'll just have a good time over there. I will over time keep adding on benefits for both of the tiers that I have, but definitely head on over there. And without further ado, let's just get into the 21 books, because I'm telling you, this is going to be a long video. Go grab a coffee, grab yourself something to eat, because I have a feeling we're going to be here for a minute. So let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead. This is not in any order. I have no rhyme or reason for this, the way that I stacked these books. So it's not like it's the first book I read or the second book. We're just going to go with what is on top. And what I want to talk about first is 2 series that I have finished. One is complete, one is not complete. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about those, because I did make videos for both of these series if you wanted to look back on my channel whenever I read them earlier in the month. But the first book we're going to talk about is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. So you guys, I know that some of you have already watched the video, so you already know my thoughts on this, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. But I did not have a good time with Caraval. I read it because I wanted to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and I'm glad I did, because I got to know Jax as a character a little bit better than I would have known going into that series. However, this book just did not do it for me. It's not a bad book. I do understand why people love this series. I read Caraval, I read Legendary, and I read Finale. All 3 of them in a 4-day span. And so I finished the trilogy. And although I know why people love this series, it just was not for me. I didn't like the fact that we were in Caraval, the first book, and we were doing, everything and trying to unwrap this mystery, find her sister, different things like that. But then whenever Legendary came around, all of a sudden we're back in another Caraval, and it's actually her sister that's going through it, and they're both trying to figure out this mystery, and it just confused me. So I was like, I understand, that that's what this world is about, because you have Legend who, puts these Caravals on. But I was like, we've already been through it in the first book. I don't want to go through it again with her sister, I mean, I couldn't do it. But Jax was a good character. I absolutely loved him in Legendary and Finale. I know he's a bad guy, but after reading the next series, Jax has my heart. I mean, there's no way around it. But I read this book. I think I gave 3 stars to the first book and the second book, and 2 stars for the last one. I don't remember. I think I ended up saying that for the trilogy in a whole, I gave it a 2 star. I just didn't have a good time. I feel like the way that the third book happened, too many plot holes, way too rushed. We're going off on tangents that we don't need to be talking about. It just didn't wrap up very well for me. But that's just me as a reader. Not saying that it's a bad book. It's just not my cup of tea, and that's okay. So I read all 3 of these books. I only own the first one. So, but I did read all 3 of those. If you want to know more in-depth thoughts about this series, make sure that you go back to the video that I posted earlier in June that wrapped up how I read all 3 of these books in a 4-day span. The next one that I'm going to talk about is, of course, Once Upon a Broken Heart and the Ballad of Never After, which I ended up reading after I finished Caraval. Now, I also posted a video about this where I read both of these books in a 24-hour period. I could not put them down. I was so, engrossed into the story. 5 stars for both of these books, absolutely. For one, Stephanie Garber's writing got much, much better. 2, the story was way more intriguing than Caraval was, for me at least. And Jax is to die for. I love Evangeline. I loved the twists and turns that we found out. I loved, how we would be going on a certain thing, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Stephanie Garber is like throwing in things that just throw you off. Loved this book series. Cannot wait for A Curse of True Love or A Curse for True Love. Anyway, it comes out in September or October. I've already pre-ordered it. These are the Fairy Loot editions of the books, so I cannot wait until that opens up to pre-order the 3rd book in this series. But I love it. I cannot wait for the next book to come out. I need to know what happens. What happens to Jax? What happens to Evangeline? The way that the Ballad of Never After ended, you guys. Holy cow. Make sure you go back and, if you don't mind spoilers, go back and watch my video because my thoughts are a mess. I'm all over the place. I actually sat there and cried at the end of Ballad of Never After. Just absolutely bawled my eyes out. And my husband's looking at me like, what is happening right now? So, a new love for this series. So, definitely go check these out. I did say in my video that you should read Caraval first so you can get to know Jax. I now am amending that statement because you learn a little bit about Jax here, maybe not fully, and you don't know the whole backstory about what he's trying to accomplish in this series. So if you don't mind that, you could just read this series if you wanted to. So loved these books. So those were the first 5 books of the month that I read. I don't think they were the first ones, but 5 books down already out of the 21 or 22 books that I read this month. So then we're going to talk about, sorry, I have a stack here because they just won't stack up next to me. Next, we're going to talk about Night Chaser by Amanda Boucher. So I'm disappointed in myself because I found out that I am not a huge sci-fi girly. I like sci-fi in certain aspects, but for the most part, I'm not a sci-fi person. So I read this. I think this was the first book that I read in June. And I've heard nothing but good things about Amanda Boucher as an author and her series. And I just picked up the wrong one to test her out. So I'm not tossing her to the wind. I will try another book by her in a different series. I didn't like this one only because I feel like the female main character, what's her name? Tess is, she's hard to understand, to be honest with you, and I don't understand some of her choices. This series is unfinished, and no one knows if the third book is ever going to come out, which is another reason why I won't continue this series, but I just didn't have a good time. There really wasn't any romance, and I gotta have some romance, even if it's just a little bit. The story just didn't intrigue me. I couldn't stay into the book. I didn't understand why we were doing some of the things that we were doing. So this is just kind of a letdown for me. I think I gave it 1 or 2 stars. I will continue on. What's her other series? A Promise of Fire. A Promise of Fire is what I've heard a lot of people talk about, but I just loved this cover. So I was like, let's just try Night Chaser. It couldn't be that bad. Bad choice, guys. I had a bad choice. So we're not going to continue on with this series. Then the next book that I read, I keep saying the next book that I read, you know what I mean, is Silver in the Bone by Alexandra Bracken. So this one is a Fairy Loot edition. It is on my most anticipated releases of 2023. I will tell everybody that up until about 80% of this book, it was a 1 star for me. I just could not stay into it at all. I didn't understand half of what was going on. I mean, not that I didn't understand it, I just didn't understand the choices. I didn't understand why we were doing some of the things we were doing. But this kind of has an Arthurian legend, not really a retelling, but kind of that aspect. And towards the end of it, probably the last 10-15%, I got hooked. And I'm like, now I got to read the second one. So a 1 star turned into a 3 star. I enjoyed myself. I really did, but it wasn't outstanding. It wasn't anything that I had expected from Alexandra Bracken. It's not some of her best work, but I think that it has potential. The way that this ended, the way that the series potentially could go, could be a very, very good series. So I'm not going to write it off yet. I am going to read the second book whenever it comes out, whenever that will be. But 3 stars. I had a good time. If you like Arthurian legend and you like the fantasy aspect and more of like kind of an epic fantasy plot where, you know, you're on a quest and you have all these moving parts and stuff, you would really like this book. Just know going in that probably 50 to 60% of the book, the very first part of it, you probably won't enjoy. Just power through, because the way that it ends really lets you know how she's setting up this world and how she's setting up this plot. So I'm pretty excited for the second one. So I wasn't, you know, too upset for how that happened. Okay, the next one, you guys, was the disappointment of June. The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I'm very disappointed in this series. I DNF'd it. It was terrible. It was trash. I don't understand why a lot of people love this book. I really, really don't. I mean, I'm not judging. If you love this book, by all means, love books that you love. There are books that I love that people think are trash, and that's okay. For me, if you are anybody that likes the majority of the books that I read and we kind of have similar tastes, don't read this book. It is terrible. Absolutely terrible. I didn't like the world building, hated the characters, didn't understand why this girl who is supposed to be sheltered her whole life, be, you know, in hiding and everything, knows so much about the world around her. Like, aren't you sheltered, girl? Like, how do you know all of this? And then on top of that, it has kind of an insta-love type of aspect where all of a sudden this prince comes in and she's just like, I can't stop thinking about him or whatever from page 1. And I'm like, can you build me up a little bit? Seriously. I only made it probably 60% of the way through and I DNF'd. I could not continue. I thought it was terrible. So that's The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I will not continue this series. I'm not writing the author off. If she comes out with other work, I will give her another shot. This was just not for me. Not at all. So I have no intentions of ever continuing that. The next one came out of a book box, and I am so happy to report, guys, that for the first time in my book box exploration history of reading these books, it was a hit. So this is Bow Before the Elf Queen by J.M. Curl. This is a book box exclusive, so of course it has, it's signed by the author and everything. This book is amazing. I put the second book, it's called Long Live the Elf Queen, on my TBR. I did not, on Goodreads, I put it on there. I did not put it on my July TBR because I already have a hefty July TBR as it is. But if I get to it, I get to it. I cannot wait to continue this series. It was so, so good. I feel like the world around them and the characters were a little juvenile and a little young adultish, but some of the aspects really drew me in. I loved some of, the way that the magic works, the way that the world is, different things like that. It really drew me in. I love the, romance in here. I love a lot of stuff about this book. So it's a hit, guys. A 4-star. It's a hit. I plan on reading the next book. I don't know if this is a duology or a trilogy, but I plan on being here for it because I need to know what happens, especially the way that this book ended. It was so hard for me not to dive right into the second book. So I cannot wait, guys. If you love fantasy romances and you love something that's not dense, something that is very easy to get into, the world building isn't overextensive and stuff, pick this up. I think you might thoroughly enjoy it. So then I need to grab my next stack. Hold on. Then I am happy to report that another book box was another success, but this book was also on my most anticipated releases of 2023, and that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I was really excited for this book coming out, and I am happy to report that I am not disappointed in the least. I actually loved this. I can't wait to see where this series is going to go. Again, I don't know if it's a duology or a trilogy. What I loved about this book was, even though it had fantastical elements to it, and you find out why it's called Divine Rivals, gods really don't play a huge part in the first book, which I'm happy about. I'm pretty sure they're going to play a big part in the second book. But what I loved about this was these two characters. They are, rival enemies, type of thing. But they're writing each other. And I just loved the letter aspect, the notes that they would pass each other, just different things that they would talk about. And the world building in this wasn't very extensive or dense. But it just brought me back to kind of like a World War II vibe, kind of like a, we're going to send love letters to each other the way that everyone used to do in the past before technology. It was just such a delight. I absolutely loved this book. Cannot wait for the next one. Any hype that's going around about this book is fully deserved. Look at these end pages, or the edges. How gorgeous. Anyway, cannot wait for the next book in this. If you guys want kind of like a World War II vibe type of book, one that doesn't really deal with a lot of fantastical elements, but brings you back to kind of like the old times of writing letters and, falling in love that way and different things. This book is so good. I highly suggest picking it up for anybody. Give it a try. You may not like it, but more times than not, I think you're going to love it. So, Divine Rivals. Cannot wait for the next one. So, I need to find out when it's going to be coming out. The next book on my wrap-up is Blood Solace by Vila Roth. This was book 2 in the Blood Grace series. I am happy to say that I am devouring these books. They are political fantasies. They are very dense, very slow writing, very, formal writing. So it does take a little bit of time to get through it. But I'm just eating this world up, eating the politics up, eating everything that Leo and Cassia are doing. I don't really want to give away a whole lot about this in case if you haven't read the first book, but I suggest get into the Blood Mercy or the Blood Grace series. Blood Mercy is the first book in here. Leo is such a marshmallow, but I love him to death. Cassia is fierce and everything. And what happened to my lighting? Anyway, so I am loving it. I know that a lot of people have said that it's very dense in part of like political talk and, you know, just kind of like conversations instead of action. I'm eating it up, guys. I'm loving every bit of it. Cannot wait to continue this series. There is an 8th book that is coming out, so I'm hoping to get through the 7 books before the 8th one does, or at least shortly thereafter it releases. So I cannot wait to keep going. I am reading this for Becca in the Books, her Alpha Ho book club. So cannot wait to continue on with this series. I'm just loving Leo and Cassia. If you guys love fantasy and you don't mind a dense political fantasy that doesn't have a whole lot of action, but a really good plot and a really good story, pick it up. It is so, so good. The next one is The Flyaways by A.R. Hadley. I was sent this by the author, and she, you know, had reached out to me on Instagram. I told her kind of what I was into, and she just sent me a book that she thinks that I would like, and I enjoyed this. Okay, it's not very long, but let me tell you, before you go into this book, if you need to check trigger warnings, because there are some, you know, content that is expressed in here that may not be for everybody. What I loved about this book is it's morally gray. I loved the fact that it talks about some points and things in life that are hard for people to understand. Maybe they don't agree with people that live this life. I really enjoyed it. It is not, I mean, it is a romance, but it's not a romance that you think. It is very unconventional. It has some hard-hitting topics in here. You may not agree with things. I mean, some things, you know, are kind of like borderline. Is this good? Is this not good? You know, kind of behavior. But in the end, if you stick with it, it really teaches you some things that maybe you didn't understand about relationships and stuff, because, you know, he's a professor and she's a student, and I feel like he takes advantage of her a little bit. I feel like he uses his kind of authority power in a way, even though the female main character is fully in it, right? She fully loves it. It puts you in that kind of icky, awkward, you know, phase where you're just like, do I like it? Is this even, you know, good? But it is good. It teaches you a lot of things. I really like that she wrote this book, and it's a very hard-hitting topic, but she did it very well. And I am going to continue on reading some more of her other works because I really enjoyed this. So definitely pick up The Flyaways if you like unconventional romance and you like stories that kind of hit harder hitting topics. I really enjoyed this, but definitely check trigger warnings if you can. Then the next book, let's talk about it. Bewitched by Laura Thalassa. Oh my gosh, you guys. This book, so good. Okay, y'all know I'm already a Laura Thalassa fangirl, okay? But I will say, I love her Bargainer series. I don't really like her Four Horsemen, you know, series, you know, Pestilence, Famine, War, and Death. I don't really like those books. This book is amazing. Okay, pick it up. It's about witches. It's about, not really reincarnation, but about soulmates, about gods kind of thing. I don't know how else to describe it without giving anything away. Go pick it up, especially if you love the Bargainer series. This does take place in kind of the Bargainer world, but you don't meet Desmond or Callie. You don't deal with any of those, but so good. You guys have no idea. It is so good. I love the way that she wrote the female main character. I love that, you know, we deal with a lot of like memory loss, a lot of like, you know, different things like consequences to magic. It was so good. It came out in April. I can't wait for the next book. I hope Laura is typing away on her computer because I need book 2. Like right now, I need to know what happens. So definitely pick this book up. I think that if you love fantasy romances and you love kind of like a female main character that talks like somebody that you would talk to, like your friends or whatever, pick this up. It's so, so good. I just can't stress that enough. I can't say anything because then I'll give away the plot, but it's really, really good. So let me grab some more books. Whew, we're almost done, guys. We are almost done. Now, I read the Magic and Light series. I only have book 1 by Krista Street. There are 4 books, and it is the Supernatural Community. They're not very long. These are trash. I'm sorry. They're terrible. The first book, you're just following, what's her name? I don't even remember. It doesn't even have her name on the back. I digress. In the first book, our female main character, like every 5 seconds, he has a girlfriend. He has a girlfriend. He has a girlfriend. I'm so overhearing that. Very juvenile writing, very young adult, very, you can tell that this was not edited. You can tell that this wasn't fully fleshed out. You can tell that what the author was trying to do, but definitely executed it poorly. I probably would not suggest this to anybody. I gave 1 star for the whole series. A lot of wasted time. I'm not going to continue on with Krista Street at all. So she's just not an author for me. Not at all. This series was terrible. You are following our female main character. She's a witch and she heals people. And then, she hires a bodyguard named Logan. Her touch, every time she touches people, kind of hurts her a little bit, so she avoids touching. But then, she touches Logan, all of a sudden nothing happens. So now he's a potential mate. And that is constantly driven into your head. This was madness trying to read. I don't even know why I read all 4 books. I really don't know why I read all 4 books. 1 star. That's about all that I can say about that. Next up, I reread Dirty Lying Fairies by Sabrina Blackberry. So this was a Wattpad book, a long time ago. I did get an arc of this whenever she was publishing it. And then, of course, I picked up the hardcover because I absolutely love this story and I cannot wait for the second book in the series. What is the series called? Oh, I can't even... Oh, yeah, the Enchanted Fates series. So, you're dealing with the Fae. You're dealing with, kind of fairies that are like tricksters. They do changelings type of thing, and they have different courts, but it's like an urban fantasy because they live, in Seattle. So, it's so good, you guys. The story is so good. Of course, the writing isn't, excellent, but it's good enough that you keep into the story. You are just flying through the pages wanting to know what happens. Loved this series, or loved this book. Pick it up if you haven't, if you've never even heard of it, because it's so good. It's whimsical in a way where you're just kind of laughing, some humor, whatever, but then it does deal with some darker things, and it does deal with, romance and fated mates and different things like that, but so good. So good. I love that she took the fairies, made it urban fantasy, and put a big twist on it, and I really loved it. So pick it up. I think anybody would enjoy that. The next book that I read, The Choice by A. Jade. I'm very upset because the second book should have already been out, but I digress. If you have watched my channel, you know that I loved The Words by A. Jade. It was probably, as of right now, my favorite book of 2023. It's a contemporary romance. It definitely deals with some harder topics, but I really, really loved it. And then The Choice is kind of a spin-off, and it's supposed to be a duology, The Choice and The Consequences book 2. and it deals with two characters from the words, and it gives you, this is their backstory about how they met, you know, all of that stuff. This book, you need to check trigger warnings. It deals with assault. It deals with family members, you know, raping and molesting, you know, their younger family members. It deals with people in foster care and what some actually go through. It deals with cheating. It deals with a lot of things. It deals with suicide. It deals with a lot of hard-hitting topics. So please check trigger warnings before you go into this book. But I really enjoyed it. What a whirlwind for the characters of what they've been through. You know, just it really caught me off guard because I did not expect that drastic of a backstory for these characters, but it actually rings true for who they are, especially for what you know from the words. And what I really loved about what Ashley J did was at the very beginning of this book, she wrote kind of like an author note in there where she's telling you, unless you're in that situation, you can't judge anybody, and it deals with real life things, right? And so, you know, and I really liked that because she's like, don't judge my characters too hard, don't judge me, because unless you're in that situation, you don't know what you would do. It's very easy to be an outsider looking in saying, well, why did you do that? That was a terrible choice, and you know, this, that, and the other thing. So I really loved this. I can't wait for the second book to see how the story progresses, because I know where they're at in the words, and I'm wondering if the consequence is going to be like after the words, you know, like, so we're going to continue on and see how it wraps up with their, you know, story. But really enjoyed this. Devoured it. I couldn't put it down. So if you liked the words, pick up The Choice. And then lastly, I think this is the final book that I read in June. I don't even know. I'm probably even missing a book in there. I read so much that I don't even know how I fit all these books in. But it's Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. So this is a novella that is in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. So the way that the reading order is, you are supposed to read the Serpent and the Wings of Night, then you read Scorched Roses, and then you finish up that duology with The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, because the two characters that are in here do play a role in the second book. However, I didn't even know this was a novella in the series, so I read it afterwards. It did not take away my enjoyment. I absolutely loved this. It's following Vale and Lilith, and it's following their story, like how they came to be. And if you've read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, you know who Vale and Lilith are. And this tells, like, kind of wraps up, like, where they came from, how they met, how their love story happened, different things like that. It's so good. This, again, it's a novella. It's not very long, but I absolutely loved it. I loved their story. I loved Vale. It gave me a greater, you know, respect for Vale in a way, and, you know, my love for Lilith and everything. So I want to read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King again to kind of get a better understanding of why Vale and Lilith are a big, you know, part of the story. So definitely pick this up if you like the Crowns of Nyaxia series. If you haven't finished that duet yet, but you've read the first book, read this one before you get to the second one. However, if you wait until after the second book, it's not going to take away your enjoyment. It really, really won't. If anything, it's going to make you want to go read the second book again. So those are all the books that I read in June. What a video. It's super long. I am so sorry. I know that I didn't go in depth with a lot of my reviews on what the books are about or how I found enjoyment in certain things. I didn't want to give a lot of spoilers, but also I didn't want to make this a 2-hour video because I can talk. So if you want to, leave me a comment below or head on over to my Patreon and we can talk more in depth about any of these books. But I hope that you have enjoyed this wrap up. I hope that maybe you're going to take away a book or two that you haven't tried yet or haven't started yet, and maybe now you will, or maybe you have found a new book that you want to try. But I hope that everybody has a great day. I hope that you are enjoying this holiday, because this is coming out on Tuesday, the 4th of July. So I hope that you are having some wonderful times with family and friends and everything else in between, eating some good food. But until next time, everyone, I will see you next time. Bye.